You go and study it, right?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Director Underhill?
Here.
Director Ratterman?
Here.
Director Thomas?
I'm here.
Director Cicada? Here. And President Davidson?
Here. Item 2 is public comment. This time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. Public is encouraged to work through staff, place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Is there any public today? Is there any public online? Do we still offer that service?
We do,
How long are we going to do that?
until the executive order is lifted for meetings.
Okay.
So currently staff on
Okay, item 3 is the budget workshop discussion regarding fiscal year 2021-22 preliminary operating capital improvement budgets. Rebecca?
Okay. Is it on already? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for having this special meeting today. Didn't want to overcrowd another meeting, so. Just wanted to thank all the staff at the district for participating in the development of this budget. There's a lot more to this budget document than we've done in the past few years, and it's a lot more narrative than it has been in the past. And every year we're just going to start adding additional information to it to make it a more comprehensive document. And I think what that does is it gives the board, the public, and staff a better understanding of exactly what the district is doing and how these operational activities translate to the budget. So, when you go through the budget document, we spend a lot of time talking about what the different types of infrastructure that we're responsible for, what the efforts are in the field, what the efforts are across various departments, because I think it's important to understand that we really are, a 24/7 operation, and that translates to our budget that we're going to be talking about today. So it does look different than it's historically looked. And each year we're going to be adding, like I said, additional information to this. Eventually, what I would like to do is get back to the point where we actually can submit the budget to the government, the GFOA, for excellence in budgetary reporting. So that used to happen years ago. And so I'd like to get back to that point. So this is kind of the first step in getting there. Is it just the top button, side button?
It's the
Okay. All right. So just real quick, the components of the budget. Normally, what we've done is we have spent time talking about the operating budget, which is the sources, which is revenue transfers in, and the uses, which is expenditures, capital outlay, and the CIP. This year, we're folding in conversation and a recognition of fund balance. So that has been something that we really haven't talked about in this last several years. I think it's a really important component. So when you think about fund balance, think about the carryover of resources from the prior year. And even though we've identified what those fund balances are for the purpose of this budget, we haven't closed the year yet. So those numbers will continue to augment until we truly close the year from a cash basis. And that'll be sometime probably in August. Okay. And then operating is what you're used to seeing. And then the CIP, just full disclosure and forewarning, what you see in this budget document here that you all have copies of as well, is it's a much more robust plan. There's a lot more narration in regards to why these projects are important and projected and budgeted for this year. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are trying to alleviate some of the operational struggles that we're encountering every day. So fund balance is kind of where this all starts. So when you, if you brought this document with you, and I think these were handed out last Wednesday, Michael? Yeah. So in terms of fund balance, that is really going to be on page 19 of your budget document. So just a little information, we used to have a fund called Fund 101. It was like the district's general fund. But we're water and we're sewer, we really don't have a general fund. We don't have discretionary funding for the purposes of our operations. We do have some discretionary funding, but all of it really is making its way into water activities or sewer activities to offset and help offset some additional activities there. But what was happening is the Fund 101 was sitting there, and ultimately there was $19.1 million in accumulated negative cash and negative cash equivalents, which meant your water fund, your sewer fund, your R&R fund, like all of your other water and sewer enterprise funds had positive cash and cash equivalents, much higher than they should have, because the negative offset was sitting in this general fund. So what we needed to do in order to try to really identify what the true fund balance was by fund, which you can see on page 19 of your budget document, was to allocate and distribute those negative cash and cash equivalents out of that general fund to all of the funds in the treasury. And by doing that, then we're able to really see how much is in the interest reserve, how much is truly in the water fund, how much is truly in the water R&R, the sewer R&R, or the expansion funds. And once we could get to that, then we truly know what the fund balance is in each fund is, and we can build on that. So when you think about budget, step one is identifying what your fund balance or your cash carry is from the year before. Then you factor in what your projected revenues are going to be. You then are going to use those two sources to fund your expenditures, and hopefully you get to zero or a net positive for future activities. This whole project took about 18 months to complete, because we also had to analyze, make sure, double check with the auditors that we weren't stepping on anyone's toes. And then we ultimately did it. And so that is what is on page 19 in here. With regards to page 19, we've broken it up into water enterprise and sewer and wastewater enterprise. We have a lot of restricted funds. The expansion funds are really restricted for those particular service areas. The water fund or the sewer fund are really restricted for operational activities. And then you've got your restrictions on your R&R, okay?
Rebecca, can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
This is crystal clear in your mind. It is not in mine. The 19.1 million that you show that has to be reallocated, and you said that occurred on page 19, but can you give me an example? Just point to one so I can understand what sort of adjusting entry you made to redistribute the 19 million negative.
Yeah, so like an example would be if you look on page 19 and go down to the water operating line. It's got a projected working capital balance of a little over $8 million. In the general ledger, that number would have been probably closer to 12 million. And it really wasn't, it really didn't have $12 million of cash in it.
Okay, so the numbers here are after you made the adjustment. Yes. There's no tracking that you can point to or anything to use.
No.
Okay. All right.
So that was important to get to this point because, and the other thing, and we've talked about it probably at the finance committee, and when we talk about budget status reports, but another big reason why our operating interest has gone down is because when the interest would get allocated, it would get allocated based on the cash that was the daily average cash balance that's in every fund. So the water fund had this enormous cash balance, but the reality is it really didn't. I mean, it did, but not $12 million, not $14 million. And so it was getting the lion's share of the interest, and really the lion's share of the interest should have been going to the interest reserve, the R&R funds. And so the interest for several years was getting over allocated to the water fund. All in all, I mean, the water enterprise still, you can tell if you look kind of midway down, the total water enterprise starting is almost $26 million. So all in all, it was getting where it needed to go overall in terms of water enterprise. But because our funds are so restrictive, you know, you are going to spend Copper Cove water expansion only for Copper Cove expansion. You're not going to use it for water operations. The interest reserve has its own set of restrictions even within it. You've got your 90-day emergency reserve, you've got rate stabilization. All of those are all make up that water enterprise, same as sewer, but they weren't getting the correct interest that was allocated.
It looks like that could be a very complex calculation. You don't have bank accounts, you just have sub-accounts on
We
a
have
general.
funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you get the interest on the overall, the larger fund, you have the electronic ability to say, okay, 2% goes to here, 3% goes to there.
Yeah, so we allocate it, we prorate it. So we have a whole calculation that occurs so that we can allocate the interest where it needs to go into each respective fund.
All right, good.
Capital on both funds, wastewater fund on page 19. Capital about halfway down the water enterprise fund, it says capital improvement dash water, and then right below it, capital improvement dash water R&R.
Yep.
The R&R funds are what's collected
From the
in the
base rate.
dedicated monies from. Okay, so what is the other one?
So the other one is a carryover from years ago, prior to R&R. And so what would happen is expenditures related to capital expenditures, not capital outlay, but capital expenditures would occur, and they would get posted to a capital improvement water fund or a capital improvement sewer fund. And then operating money would get transferred into those, or grants, or however those respective projects were getting funded. What happened, and this is part of the problem, when you don't have your fund balance completely allocated where it needs to be, you are unaware that these funds that really should have been closed out several years ago were sitting there with a negative balance. And so these will have to be cleared up. So that's why you see capital improvement water with a negative 139, right? And then the projected balance at the end of as of June 30th, 2022 is 0, because we're going to reallocate the resources between, because ultimately what's happening is the R&R activities and the capital improvement activities should have gotten cleared out, but there was this changeover period where that didn't happen.
Rebecca, weren't we borrowing from the water fund? Don't we owe it money back?
The sewer fund owes the water fund, yes.
So are we just consolidating those two lines? Wouldn't that make sense?
We're going to consolidate those two.
Those two
Yep.
lines, okay.
But we are still paying the water fund back.
The water fund is continuing to get paid back. Yeah, when we get further into this presentation, you'll see where that will be done, but we have an end date on that debt service, yeah.
So page 19, is that Is that where we're starting July 1st? Or are we, or
So
or this?
projected for July 1st, that first column is where our starting,
Okay,
okay? And then the second column, you can consider that projected revenues, okay? The third column is projected expenditures. The fourth column is debt payments that might be coming from some of those resources. Remember that R&R in water does have some debt service associated with it. And then we've got capital expenditures related to CIP. And then we also have some capital outlay that's happening. And then we also use expansion funds to offset some capital expenditures.
and when it says total expenditures on column 3, which is, it seems to be, it should be a negative number. How come that's not in parentheses when other numbers and other columns are in parentheses?
Because that is, it's just how we did the calculation, but that fund transfer, the reason it's negative is because that is money that's coming out of the R&R fund. There's money coming in and there's money coming out.
And that's receipts and expenditures?
No, those are fund transfers. Fund transfers is almost the last column.
Yeah, I
It's
see
right
that.
next to projected balance. It's kind of a little funky, but we have positive transfers and negative transfers. We have transfers in and transfers out. So for me, I needed to, for the most part, I would put them all just positive and then subtract which columns I needed to, except for the fund transfers. We literally have transfers in and transfers out in multiple funds. So just for going forward, probably what I'll do is I'll probably make 2 columns going forward and have a transfer in column and a transfer out column. But for this purpose, we just consolidated them.
Excuse me.
Yep.
One of the things that is very important to us, that we have a 90-day emergency
Yep.
reserve.
Yep.
And are we continuously adding to
No.
that, or we're just keeping that?
No, so that number stays the same. So there is a policy that was adopted, I think it was in 2006.
Rebecca, is it a percentage of our budget or is it fixed?
It's per the resolution that was adopted back in, it's either 2006 or 2008, it's one of them. It basically said that the interest reserve in total needed to be $8 million, which it is more than $8 million between the water portion and the sewer portion. But as years have gone on, what has happened is a portion of that needed to be the 90-day reserve, and a portion of that needed to be the water rights, and a portion was going to be a CIP cash flow. So when you look at and we'll just focus on the water enterprise, you look at that interest reserve section that's bolded, every line underneath that sits in that interest reserve fund. And that all is covered under that one resolution that was passed years ago that we probably need to dust off and talk about a little bit more.
Well,
But-
it would seem that we need to know what it costs to operate for 90 days.
Right.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, so what we know is it's about $4 million is technically what should be in there. And we've got 2.9 plus another 1,080,000. So the interest reserve gets kind of
Is the
split.
only, of those 3 items that used to be the $8 million, it was actually North Fork money.
Right.
Is that, I seem to recall that the only income source for that fund is interest on that money?
Yep.
So there's no other, we don't add anything from the rest of the budget?
The property taxes, a portion of the property taxes goes into it's called a special project reserve.
Is it growing as fast as inflation?
We take 15% off the top of the property tax allocation that we get every year, and that goes directly into this fund. And then the interest that gets earned in the district goes into this fund. What has happened though over the
Wait,
years.
the interest on what? You just said you just said interest is divided amongst all.
It
the funds
does.
as it comes
So the
in.
interest that gets earned in this fund.
Oh,
gets,
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Those three particular ones that.
There, it's a large fund, so this fund actually gets the lion's share of all the interest.
Okay.
But what has happened throughout the years is as the property taxes have gone into that interest reserve fund, into that special projects sub-reserve, every year the budget has pulled money out. It's probably not as much as the property taxes that go in, but it's been close. And so really it's only been growing by the amount of the interest for the most part that has been accumulating in there. And the only other allocations we made, we did do the $2.4 million from the PG&E settlement. We transferred that in there to be part of that water rights for relicensing reserve. And we transferred, there was the forest thinning portion, net revenue was about $39,000 is what that was, I think, that we transferred in there, 35,000. So the rest of the funds really have just sat there and earned interest within that fund.
Is there any way we're going to rectify the fact that, you say that it doesn't quite, we use what we're getting, or we're using our interest?
We're using the property taxes that go in there. Yeah. Well, it comes up to a bigger question, and we've had this conversation before where we need to have a wider conversation with regards to our reserve policy and to determine what exactly we really need in terms of reserves, and what those reserves should be. A lot of these reserves are carryover from prior to even our existing financial policy. And so they have just carried over year over year. And there's, there was a reason for them. The rate stabilization reserve was there specifically because of it was a debt that we had, and I can't remember which, it was from several years ago, but in order to meet the terms of that debt, we needed to have a rate stabilization reserve. The CIP cash flow reserve was there because we used to rely a lot more on grants that maybe didn't have a quick turnaround in terms of payment. And so we needed to have some sort of reserve for that gap in funding. We tend to have a lot better terms in terms of being able to get those reimbursements quicker. The Reach 3A reserves, those are terms of the debt service that we had to carry. We will also have to do the same thing for the USDA AMI.
That would be like the reserve in there for at least one payment, one annual payment.
Yep.
And
So
what's the water reserve for? It's
So-
new?
that's new. So in the course of this, the water operating, you can see we're projecting about a little over $8 million for water operating. The one conversation that I haven't seen happen in the budget discussion historically that I've gone back to is normally what would happen that I've been involved in budgets is you have your budgeted revenue, your budgeted expenditures. It's a plan. It never ends exactly as you planned it was going to. And so you hope that you're either going to break even or you might come out a little bit ahead. So you have a little bit of a cushion for the following year. And then the next year when you build your budget, there would be this carryover from the year before. That conversation really hasn't happened with the board. And so every year when the budget would come forward, it would be, here's your revenues, here's your projected expenditures. And we didn't really address what happened the year before. So this is an accumulation of multiple things. Number one, the water fund only started this water fund itself only started, I think, in 2011. Prior to that, there were all these other little funds all over the place. And then in 2011, there was a consolidation because you really should only have as many funds as you actually need. You shouldn't have a bunch of funds. And so that consolidation happened. So about half of this dollar amount is from that consolidation. And then about half of this dollar amount is from the fact that there were unanticipated revenues or revenues in excess of expenditures. So maybe you had, say, you didn't spend as much in salaries and benefits, you didn't spend as much in service supplies, you didn't have as much professional services, and your revenues came in good. But at the same time, if you recall, I said we were taking money out of that special projects reserve because that was going to fund capital outlay or special projects in the operating accounts. If you could go back in time, I mean, the reason you do that is because you don't have sufficient operating revenues, right? To buy that vehicle or to buy that heavy piece of equipment or to do whatever that deferred maintenance is. So the special projects money would get transferred in. Well, if you had savings and you had unanticipated revenue come in hindsight, you probably wouldn't have transferred that money, right? But it was transferred. So as the years have gone on, the transfer has come in from the interest reserve fund and the operating fund. And it probably didn't have to. Plus you had some savings during the year. So about half of that $8 million is from that consolidation into the water fund when it first was created in 2011. And about half is from years of transfers in, coupled with unanticipated revenue and savings year over year for the budget. So we've got this accumulated balance in the water fund that gives us an opportunity to say, okay, let's just reset for a second, move that off to because it's still water money, right? So
It's
that's
water revenue that can be spent.
water revenue that can be spent, but think of it as one time. And so, where Michael and I talked about this is really reserve it, utilize it for purposes of expenditures that, whether it's helping to offset, grant matches or capital outlay, or if we have a dip in revenue.
We could transfer it into our water rights FERC relicensing and have $10 million in there.
You could
Also.
do that, yeah. So it gives us an opportunity to either shore up other shortfalls that we might have in the budget,
To avoid budget.
to avoid budget constraints or gaps in budget, and then also to bolster other reserves. So I think there'll be additional conversations going with exactly what we need to do. I think overall, we need to have a conversation about reserves in general.
What's the status? I mean, we created those three big accounts primarily because we were under pressure not to have so much in reserves. What's the status of that pressure? Are we still under that to have a limit on reserves?
To have a limit on reserves?
Yeah, well, the reason that we took the $8 million fund, which was just a single fund, and divided it into those legal and others, we were being told by the state that we were at risk of having too much reserves. We couldn't do any rate increases or anything like that because of that. So is that still a real thing, or was it ever a real thing? I honestly couldn't tell you, but I do remember that's why we specified actual locations for that money. Right.
So I think what's important is there is definitely there's strong evidence to have strong reserves.
To have what?
To have very strong reserves, because revenues fluctuate, costs go up. And I think what's important, though, is that whatever reserves we have, it's very clear what they're for, and it's very clear what they will be used for.
We don't have any auditor pressure or anything in that?
No, because we can absolutely, and we can talk about this, we can absolutely identify shortfalls in our overall infrastructure.
Thinking back, I kind of remember that it was when the state was taking money back from us.
Oh, probably Prop 1A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's why we ended up doing it.
So I think it was probably a priority to make sure your reserves funds were were allocated to specific purposes, and I think that's what our reserve policy does. But I think just to reiterate one thing, that with that new water reserve, I think it's really important not to use that type of reserve for any ongoing expenses.
Correct.
What we know is, with costs going up, we're going to be under a lot of budget pressure, both as far as operating costs and capital improvement costs. So if we can use that to offset one-time expenses and including potentially capital improvement projects, or leverage that so that we can have better financing to make sure we're funding all of our capital improvement projects, I think that's kind of what we have our eye on for those funds.
Yep.
So, but this same thing that happened in the water fund to create this new water reserve didn't happen in wastewater?
It did not, and I'm not entirely
There's never
surprised
been
by
any
that.
left over at the end of the year and
No, so
Oh,
unfortunately, unfortunately, wastewater has, and we knew this, was running at a deficit for quite a while.
Right.
And so that was a big driver for the last rate study, the one that we're in right now, the rate plan that we're in right now, is because we needed to dig out for the wastewater fund. So we're seeing the light finally, but it's like razor thin. So there's still a ways to go on that one. Unfortunately, that's the least number of customers in terms of what we have for billing. And it's an expensive section of operations, the wastewater, and we are still razor thin on that one.
But with that said, are we making our obligation of those repayments from
Yes.
the sewer to
Yep.
the water? Okay.
Yep.
What's that balance now? About?
That'll be lit. I'll have it in here.
Okay.
It's going on,
We'll
but
get to
yeah.
it. We'll get to it.
So
Thanks.
before we move on, are there any other questions on this fund balance analysis? Because this is a whole shift from what you guys have seen before. So.
We could spend days here on this page.
And as you mentioned, we're going to have to take a look at it to up it to closer to 4 million. Is that what you're saying?
It's something we need to talk about. Yeah,
What is
and
the-
it really, and some of it just depends on the volatility of our revenues. So, I mean, I guess the good news is we don't have super
Our
volatile
emergency reserve.
revenues. If we did, you want to have a higher, like 90-day reserve. We don't necessarily have that.
Oh, the 90-day.
Yeah, so, but I think in all, we just want to make sure that we have a really good, firm handle on the reserves and which ones we still need or which ones probably need to be allocated for more high priority areas, but that will be forthcoming. So this was just the water and the wastewater section, but, the other thing is with reserves, there's several things that make it good to have strong reserves. Bond rating.
Yeah.
So if we ever want to borrow, granting agencies look at that because it helps solidify that we can in fact pay our debt. Even if there was, kind of a blip in our revenues. So it's very important to have sufficient reserves. So I was very happy when we were done with this exercise that we do have some pretty strong reserves.
And wasn't that our problem with that USDA loan in West Point, consolidation, wastewater, that we didn't have proper reserves in wastewater, so we couldn't go through with that project and take that loan?
I wasn't involved in
Pretty sure
that
for like
conversation
eight
back
years,
then.
that thing, Jesse's saying, yeah, that thing
Is
sat
that
on the
what-
shelf.
Yeah, and I think, the alternative to having strong reserves for debt purposes is having higher rates.
It was a loan to debt
And
ratio.
so I
That was
think
our
it was a
problem.
loan to debt ratio, but the thing that fixed that was 5 years ago when the rate increase went in, that showed that we're on track, that we're no longer running an annual deficit on the sewer side, so we can afford to
Right.
take on debt.
It wasn't reserves, it was the.
Okay.
Right, so well, yeah, if you don't have those reserves, then you're gonna have to raise rates to show that you have that
Right.
revenue. So
Scott just pointed out something that the water reserve is close to 3 million.
The
Then we
90.
have $1 million down in wastewater, which is 4.
The
Yes.
90 days together. adds
So
up.
so the interest reserve is really, even though for our purposes, it's one fund, for the purposes of the auditors and for the purposes of when we, when the auditors look at it, or if we were to do another rate study, when they look at it, that interest reserve, a portion is tied to water and a portion is tied to sewer. So it's split that way as well.
And so we're saying 4 million has to be in water.
No,
No,
total for the
Okay,
district.
All right, and we're,
Yeah, we're pretty good.
yeah, okay, good.
But it's something we always need to kind of watch. So as the budget grows, that number goes up. Okay, so when you think about sources, we're talking about revenue, transfers in, money coming in. So we've got rate revenue, our property taxes, we have power sales, and we have transfers. So the lion's share of our revenue, no surprise to anybody, is rates and fees. We've got about 76% that comes from that. Taxes, which is the property taxes, is about 8%. Power sales is about 2%. Transfers is about 10%. Transfers we get associated with maybe money coming in from expansion funds, maybe there's money coming in from R&R to offset labor costs that they're working on supporting the CIP project.
Oh, I thought that was water transfers.
It's all transfers now, yeah.
Not yet.
Income from water
Income.
transfers, that's what we're looking for in the
Not
future.
yet, not yet.
Not yet, not yet. But those are our sources. So, you can tell the bulk of everything is on the rates. So we really watch the rates. We're really looking at, where we're at in terms of budget to collections.
What's the forecast on that in regards to property taxes? Do we hover around 8% of this pie, or is it, we're obviously on an upswing where, houses are worth 40% more than they were just a year or two ago.
So the auditor's office in general, just because I worked with her for many years, we projected about 2% increase, maybe 2.5%. I'll have to go back and look at my notes.
I thought they only go up 1%.
They can go up 2%. They can go up as much as 2%. However, there were still a lot of properties that were in Prop 8, which were declining value. Also, because of all the transfers that have happened, all the sales that have happened, that 2% goes out the window, right? Because if you bought a house,
It's just whatever.
it's whatever
reassessed.
that sale price is. The issue is she is working, her office today is working on things that happened a year ago. And
I have to bring
so,
in titles and stuff all the time. to get towards
right.
it.
And
They're
so
far behind.
we will see this blip probably in 22, 23, could be 23, 24. It just depends on the backlog in their office. And I just know historically it takes a lot of time to get through that. So we were conservative in our projections for property taxes. I am projecting it to go up based compared to what we got this year, because even this year is higher than what we had projected, not by 10, but by some. I expect probably about a 2% increase for next year. And then we'll watch it. If it's materially different, then that would be an unanticipated revenue, and we would have conversations at some point, probably in mid-year with you.
Which office does the county needs to get caught up?
Assessor.
Assessors does. And it's just the assessors though. right?
It's so the assessor will basically revalue all of those properties, right? And then they will do a coordination between the auditor and the tax collector to do supplemental bills and supplemental calculations. But that can take 1 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So It is good, but we won't see, even though, yes, we see that happening in the real estate market and we are seeing a change in market, how that translates to income for us it'll take a while.
Rebecca,
yep.
on the subject of the taxes, I don't know whether I'm remembering this correctly, but I thought that at one point, years ago, that the taxes, the portion of the property taxes that CCWD got was about 4 million. Am I wrong about that? Has it declined?
We get, I have to go back and look in total. So like I said, we get, if you look at page 22 in your budget document, there's 2.3 that goes to water. There's another $500,000 that goes to sewer.
Yep.
And then there's probably about another $500,000 that goes to that interest reserve fund because we take about 15% off the top.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. This is not CCWD, focusing on CCWD, but why won't the supervisors increase the workforce for the assessor? It seems like that's a no-brainer. They reassess the property and get the money in faster, it would help the county.
Everybody's caught up.
You think they do that with the building department as well?
Well, what's more important? If they had more money, they could hire more.
Yeah, no, one of them, they both make a little bit of money, but the assessor's office makes tons of money. I mean, tons of money and not only for the county, but for a
everyone.
lot of the entire county. There's so many special districts in this county that cemetery funds, that's all they get. And it's just a small little chunk, but they're a year and a half behind on getting it. That doesn't make any sense. I agree with you, Russ. Let's head over there next meeting.
I agree. Let's put them all out, get new people in there.
And we'll say, Rebecca, send us over here.
Yeah. You just had a budget meeting.
Rebecca said to give Leslie more stuff. No, it's an issue, and also, I know that she has struggled just hiring staff. The salary is lower in her department than in other departments, so it's hard to get people in, even if she has openings. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
And
So
we've heard that story for years.
yeah. So the other thing just to be aware of on the rates is we do have a significant number of delinquencies right now. We are actively working on them. Normally, when we're around this time of the year, because we're talking about how many potentially need to go to the tax roll, we're talking about maybe 100 accounts. We have 750 accounts that are delinquent, anywhere from a couple $100s up to several thousands of dollars. So we are doing outreach phone calls, letters. We're also actively looking at grant opportunities with all sorts of different agencies to assist with that. All of those grants obviously are going to be income-based. So
Are going to be what?
are going to be income-based. So if you're a customer that needs help,
It's the mask.
yeah, sorry, income. So we are actively, working on that. The governor's executive order will stay in place with regards to no shutoffs. That will be lifted September 30th. So we do have some time to work through what we need to do. But that will be coming soon to start having conversations, because logistically, I just don't think we have the manpower to go and shut off 750 accounts, nor do I think that is probably the best solution. But we do need to identify alternatives. So we are reaching out to other agencies and counterparts on what they're doing. CCWD historically, prior to SB 998, did not allow for payment plans. When SB 998 occurred and was passed, we did bring to the board a payment plan option that tied directly with SB 998. Other agencies had looser payment plan opportunities than we did, so they're probably in a little bit better position in order to deal with this than we currently are. SB 998 is a little more restrictive. So we will be bringing something back probably to the finance committee and to the board to have that discussion and exactly what you want to see.
Rebecca, do we have any idea if this is, I mean, I'm always a little bit confused on if we're still sending 2 bills out to a tenant and a landlord. Are we
In-
still doing that?
In some cases, so the calls and the letters are going to be important because the letters go to the property owner. So if the tenant is the one who's not been paying, we are finding that some property owners had no idea because they didn't want the bill. They just wanted the tenant to have the bill. So some of them are paying because they're shocked that the bill wasn't paid and they'll have to deal with their
It would
tenant.
seem that we might want to kind of go through those and at least identify those because we're more likely to get money from the landlord.
Yeah.
Because once we shut the water off, they can't occupy the house again.
Correct.
And they're going to want it to be re-rented
Yeah.
if they can even, get people out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to be ugly.
Yeah.
No doubt
Shouldn't
about
we
that.
also make sure that the property owner gets a copy whether they want it or not, whether they look at it?
Well, if it's
or something?
delinquent,
When it's
then we need to
delinquent,
start,
yeah.
we need to identify
For the
those.
moment, it's the first delinquent, not months back.
Right.
Did
So
you
we're,
just give it, I know you said 750, did you give a dollar amount on that?
it's about 360 something thousand.
Wow.
We're spending some time on it.
Yep. So that is all happening right now. That's the marching order that we have for staff to call, letters, continue to reach out. We are we're working with ACCA, which they have 2 grants that are potential opportunities, as well as other state and federal funding opportunities that are out there.
So if we get a grant that comes directly to the district, how do we take care of those 750 accounts? How do we apply it to the accounts?
That's what we're working through.
Okay.
Wouldn't the customer go to ACCA and they disperse it? I mean.
It
they
still
work
comes,
with
it would
them,
come to
but
us
the
directly.
check comes to
Yeah.
us for that particular account.
Yeah.
Oh,
The money would not-
associated with an account already.
Yeah.
Yes.
The customer would go to ACCA, get the grant, and on paper, they will see it, but the money will come to us,
Yes.
not the customer.
Correct.
It'll
How
go
many-
to the
how many
customer's
customers-
benefit, post to their account.
How many of those customers aren't capable of doing that? I mean, of filling out the application or even knowing about it?
ACCA's good at doing the customer.
ADCA's
outreach.
good,
Well, I mean, how
but
do-
we
how do we-
struggle with the CAP program as well.
How do we put the two together to start the process?
We're working through that.
Okay.
We're not entirely sure. ADCA's still trying to figure out exactly how they're going to do that outreach. And it's a finite amount of money. It's not a huge amount of money. And we're not the only utility agency that has delinquencies. So there's definitely
Right.
not enough to cover
Have you been
everybody.
able to charge finance fees all this time or no?
No, we don't have that in our policy. So what we have is the late fee, just flat late fee, and that's it.
And no stop. They just don't keep on. Or do they keep going every single month?
Every 2 months.
Will
Yeah.
you add that repayment plan
That
to
gets
the
ugly.
finance committee?
Yep.
Is that possible?
And on a couple other points on the ACCA grants, those require full, so the not necessarily debt forgiveness, but the client has to be paid up in full. So unless it covers the whole balance or we debt forgive, which we wouldn't do, then those customers wouldn't be eligible.
Is there a limit on what they're going to give?
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's a
What
small
is it?
number.
Um,
200.
Per account?
no, I think, well,
I think
one
it's-
of them I think was like 200, and then the
200.
other one was up to 400.
So that's
So
probably
it's only
very,
gonna-
very few of our
Right.
delinquents are only 200.
Right.
But maybe if they could, come up with their 200
Right.
and the other 200, I mean.
And the overall cap, it's actually going to handle a very small number of customers overall. But there are other funding sources, both federal and state funding sources that are allocated for this. Governor Newsom proposed $1 billion. I think it's another $1 billion or more in federal budget, but they're still trying to figure out the funding mechanism, how that's going to make it to local agencies. The federal program is going to be based on the LIHEAP program, which is, I'm not going to forget the acronym, but it's a low income rate assistance for heating oil. But it comes through Health and Human Services, which no water agency has ever dealt with before. rather than EPA, which is what we're used to.
But a lot of the low-income people deal with them and probably have a better communication and contact and
So,
direction.
yeah, we're just still trying to figure out how that process, how those payments are going to be made, how they're going to make it to local agencies, and then how we can apply that to our individual
Yeah,
customers. So
and-
there's a process there.
Yeah, and unfortunately, how they're doing that one is they didn't exclude special districts, but the grants are available to cities and counties. And then the cities and counties would have to coordinate with the respective special districts. So we're trying to figure out, and it's not just one grant, it's multiple grants. So what we don't know is if a city or county has a competing interest, you know, if it's a dollar allocation and there's competing interests in grants, so maybe we want the utility assistance grant, but they want the rental assistance grant, and we both want the infrastructure grants, is there going to be a utility assistance grant that we're going to be able to get, or that's what we're trying to work through. So we'll be setting up a meeting with the county to try to identify who's doing what, and if there's a way that we can help facilitate that and make sure that we aren't kind of forgotten, so that we're actively pursuing that. It's a little confusing.
Wild.
Okay, so in terms of revenues, this is just the same thing that's on page 22 of your budget document. The revenues associated with water, as well as transfers in, not water transfers, but money transfers, and then sewer revenues. But it's the same information that's in your budget document. Now, in terms of uses, this is where we're spending money. So we've got salaries and benefits, we've got service supplies, you've got debt service, capital outlay. No surprise to anybody, salaries and benefits is the lion's share of the expenditures.
On the percentage for the salaries, what income did you use? What was the total of the income you used to determine that 49%?
That's the total of all of our expenditures.
I understand that. And so the 46% of what, so it's just on the expenses, not.
Only on the expenses,
Okay.
yep. Yeah,
Do you
so
have that somewhere that I wanted?
the portion of revenue,
Yeah, I just wonder how much of the revenue is used to,
yeah, I can figure that out and get it back
It's
to you.
okay. I'm
Yep.
just curious. I came up with my own number, but we're service-oriented company, so you guys kind of on labor and stuff.
Yeah, but it's a lot. So 49% is salaries and benefits, followed by service supplies, debt service is 10%, and capital outlay is 4%. So on page 20 is the positions, that's the schedule of positions. The one, actually, there's two things to make note of. Our IT administrator is retiring. So within this budget proposal, we are recommending a succession IT administrator for 2 months because he will still be on payroll until August.
So he has 2 months of PTO to use. Nice.
And so in the meantime, we need to actually hire someone. And so we're limited on being able to hire. So that's 0.17 is 2 months of an IT administrator. And then once he's off the books, that 0.17 comes off the books, and then that would be the position left. And then also just a reminder that the accountant, we had a succession accountant hired. Our one accountant is retiring in November. Actually, she'll be retiring December. And so that position will come off the books in the end of December. In terms of payroll overall, this is kind of on page 21, just kind of gives you an idea of by department what the salaries and benefits are. And then also what the breakdown is between water and sewer. And this, again, this is just expenditures, not in terms of how it correlates to revenues.
Excuse me,
Uh-huh.
there's a retiree that gets medical from the board.
Yeah.
How can that be?
No, it's retiree medical. It's
Dick Winkle.
it's like your, it's your,
So it is.
it's your medical reimbursement.
Former.
No, we have several
It says retiree
directors
medical.
Who have medical.
who have medical.
What's his name in,
Oh, yeah.
what's his name in
And
Valley
that can't
Springs?
be,
Valley Springs.
No. 'cause
Yeah,
that-
he's the guy who
They were
retired,
entitled to it.
retired at the end of the year before his term ended. So he was,
Oh, Silvera?
no,
Myers.
no, way before.
So then,
Served with Geisler. That's when they did it.
yeah.
oh, don't.
And then in terms of
Geisler died.
operating expenditures,
Winkle still.
this just gives you an idea by department what the allocation is in terms of operating expenditures. So this would be salaries and benefits and service supplies, all of that. So obviously, utility services is the largest. They have the most employees. That's the largest budget there. That's where all the capital outlay for the most part is.
That's true.
We have, my department is second, but I've got all of the kind of general IT, all of the software. I've got the insurance. Yeah. And it's not as big as utility. And then you can see what the percentage breakdowns are from there.
Winkle.
In terms of like, well, what does that mean with regards to dollars? That's on page 23. You can see the same information, but it's based on dollars there. So, when we talk about the budget and cash carry, fund balance, and being mindful that we are not utilizing that fund balance for ongoing costs and being mindful to match our revenues with our expenditures. We just wanted to point out that we do have some material increases and we do have some one-time investments just to make note of. We are doing a heavy lift on investing in software implementations because a lot of what we've done has been very manual, or we've been utilizing outdated software. So a lot of the things that we're trying to do, we are, moving full steam ahead on the utility billing system. We are switching over to the AMI meters, which are going to integrate with the utility billing system. So that's Tyler, Mueller. This next fiscal year, not only are we finishing the utility billing system and the AMI swap out, we also are going to be implementing the smart meter for consumptive information for customers, as well as Mueller software to be able to detect leaks. There's additional CMMS, which is the mobile management system that utilities uses. Also, we've talked about inventory system. When we talk about warehousing, we don't have an inventory system. It's all done manually. So we're looking at that inventory system. We also are looking at bringing payroll back in-house. Currently, ADP does it. We spend a lot of time trying to get that to calculate correctly. So I think that from a resource perspective, it ends up canceling out to just bring it in-house and do payroll in-house. We're looking at that. Those would be one-time investments in software because we have to pay for professional services for implementation, data conversion, training. But once that's done, then it's just the licensing that we're paying for. CPPA power increases, Michael has talked about that. We're continuing to watch that to see how much more it's going to increase. We did have some FERC investment this year. So we have legal expenditures included in this budget, professional services included in that, and then also a transfer to the FERC reserve. Computer replacement program. Computers really have a lifespan of about 5 years. And so we have a computer replacement every 5 years to replace about 20%, or every year to replace about 20%. We have an investment in cybersecurity and network security upgrades. This is something, that you've brought up, Scott, that with network security and cybersecurity, we did have an assessment done. We are actively working on implementing some of those changes right now. Those are the real critical, have to be done yesterday. And then we've got other things that need to be done in this next fiscal year.
Just curious, how many, did the assessment come up with expensive things that we had to do, or how, or? Just
So
in-
we have
Could you give a quick overview of what?
So
the
in
kind of-
this next, for this next fiscal year, we have included about $27,000 worth of work that needs to be done.
Was it eye-opening of how they could get in?
You wanted just to give you a list of all the vulnerabilities?
I'm not
We can do
gonna,
that. We can do that. I just think we should.
Future agenda item?
Yeah,
Well, or
I'm
actually,
not
let's do that
gonna-
offline.
yeah, it would be an offline conversation. But, yeah.
Yeah, we can meet with you one-on-one on that.
For the computer
You heard
replacement
about how to
program,
do
what's
that?
the dollar that you
So
budgeted
what-
for that?
didn't change the,
It's
initial
about
password on the
$20,000 per
machine.
year.
That if they
if
were
I
in the
recall.
office, they could get into the finance through the freaking
But
copy
if it's
machine.
one-time investments, and it's a 5-year turnover, well,
These are material increases and one-time investments. So we just did a major replacement, well, not just replacement. We did replacements of computers, quite a few. And then we also purchased new computers. So that just happened. But we also have old computers that are still being used, that will be the first replacement
so
group.
you have $20,000 in this proposed budget for computer upgrades.
Mhm. So the thing to be, I guess, to be mindful of is, in as much as, yeah, I realize, computers are expensive. Computers do have a shelf life, and they have to be able to run the correct virus software. They have to be impermeable. So if we have outdated computers that are running outdated hardware, outdated software, that can be a breach to our network overall. So it's something that, as much as you don't want to have to keep replacing computers, it is something that we all are working on now. Every single employee has a computer, at least one. So it's like having a desk phone. So that investment in cybersecurity, we also included a master plan for Sheep Ranch is in here. And then we're continuing with the capital lease improvements for the fleet. The one thing, and I think Damon kind of touched on this a little bit in our prior meeting, is like everybody and like every time we come to the board, there is a shortage in materials and the availability of equipment. So we put a full replacement of 10 vehicles in here, but we're not sure if we will truly get all 10. We might get 8, we might get 5, so that's to be determined. Since this presentation was put together, we have identified some additional increases in the budget that we will have to include before we bring it forward on the 23rd. One of them is the Stockton East. Did you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah. So an increase in the cost of the reimbursement we give to Stockton East for New Hogan operations.
So it'll be, we're estimating about $128,000 more.
Yeah, so do you have?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I don't know if it's easier if we come up here. Move your stuff here. Yeah, good afternoon. So the New Hogan contract that we have currently
with the Army Corps of Engineers for operations, maintenance, and repair, and then reclamation for our water supplies that we use at Jenny Lind currently on the Calaveras River. This is set up so that we effectively pay for the prior 5 years of expenditures, essentially a repayment for any construction that was done, as well as the actual OM&R costs spent by the Army Corps. And so, for example, in fiscal year 16 through 20, all of the accumulated expenditures are then paid over a flat rate over the next 5 years. So in that case, fiscal year 21 through 25. You might recall that this happened back in 2016, actually. We saw a prior to 2016 cost of $197,000 was essentially our portion of this. It jumped up to $350,000 for the next 5-year increment paying for that. And now we're seeing, unfortunately, a similar increase of about $155,000 up to about $495,000 for this payment. And there's several reasons I can get into for that. The majority of this comes from what was called the Tainter Gate project at the dam. This was a refurbishment of the release gates into the Calaveras River. It was a full mechanical replacement, seals, hoist systems, environmental regulations, a full gate replacement to the Calaveras River. That was completed February of this year. It was a 10-year project. And then, of course, the actual OM&R otherwise for dam maintenance and works by the Army Corps over the last 5 years. All of that comes together about $1.1 million per year. Our portion, again, of that is about $495,000 that we'll be paying.
And that's divided with Stockton East, they take, that seems disproportionate.
Yeah.
No, it's based on what our state water right is. But just out of curiosity, because they do have day use fees. Who establishes those, and what would it take for us to establish or add on to that day use fee? Is it possible? Could we be financing some of these Hogan improvements with an additional day use fee?
It's a good question, and I would have to research a bit onto that. I will point out that we plan to come next week with an agenda item for this to talk about the payment. Stockton East brought this to their board.
I know is I got a ticket the other day.
Oh, fair enough.
I didn't know how to do it.
So yeah, that's what I was going to mention, is we can bring that next week as part of the agenda memo item. We'll go over the increase in payment, what Stockton East took to their board, as well as an overview, a reminder of how we calculate the contract fees. But as far as your day use, it's a great question.
I'll actually bring it into you because I got it in my truck. It was actually just a warning sign, I think, anyway. But,
Let's deduct that from the cost.
We'll deduct that and include that in the reimbursement to Stockton East. But I would be inclined to believe that reclamation probably takes care of some of those fees as well.
It's worth looking into, I mean, we've got a lot of these, on these reservoirs that we have. I mean, the day use fees are being collected. They should be going to, like similar projects. And we should try to find out if there's any part of that we can get.
Yeah.
It's probably exclusively funding the recreational facilities, but we could put our ranger just in front of their ranger.
We might even be something we can start talking to our congressman about.
I think the overall on this item, this came as a surprise, and we don't like surprises, especially in this direction. So we're going to be taking a closer look at it because it is based on the water, the contracted amount that we have is 30,000 acre feet, but the actual water usage in that area is pretty small, and it's a pretty high dollar amount for the amount of water that
we've always struggled with that because we've never wanted to say that that we only want to pay for the water we're taking, because then it puts us at risk of, losing.
Right, so we don't want to do that, but we do want to make sure that there's, we just want some certainty when it comes to these costs.
Is this based on a contract with Stockton East or a contract with?
The Army Corps.
Stockton East and the Army Corps, yes.
Yeah, that we all agreed to the allocation of costs.
Yeah. And we'll bring forth details on that contract for next week's item. Yeah. I will just point out that, again, it's these 5-year blocks we're talking about now. And so at least for this upcoming fiscal year through, it would be 2026, then we can rely on that same $495,000. We shouldn't have any more surprises in that time. And then hopefully afterwards, knock on wood, that comes down with that project being paid off.
That's $500,000, and it isn't gonna stop. Next 5 years goes by, they'll have some other project that they're working on. And
well, the problem is are they sharing their future improvement plan?
No,
so we can budget for it? That's the problem.
We don't have any control over the expenditure, which is part of the concern here, especially now that it's reaching this dollar amount.
We
mean,
need to
this is
find somebody
significant
that pays our
increase.
bills for us once we, do our project.
Right.
Send them a bill.
Good question.
It is a good question. We'll follow
Take a
up
look
on
on
that,
that.
but, what's that?
Yeah, we'll take a look.
Yeah,
We're gonna,
we'll
like I said, we're gonna require a budget amendment for this fiscal in addition to a change in the budget for next fiscal. So we're bringing it back next week to the board.
$500,000.
It's a big hit.
In addition to that, we had about $24,000 for watershed sanitary surveys that we thought were going to be completed this fiscal year, that are actually going to carry over to next fiscal year. And then just two potentials that we're just going to keep an eye on, and if it ends up becoming a problem, we will have to have a discussion at a later date with the board. So PSPS, we have generator fuel related to PSPS included in the budget, but not at the current fuel prices. It was based on the previous PSPS events that have happened that were at the other fuel prices. So
Not at the what? The-
current fuel prices.
Oh, okay.
So the impact of PSPS is completely dependent on how long the event is. So and how many there are. So if it's just one short event, we'll probably be okay. If it's a long event or multiple long events, then we're gonna just hammer our line item for that.
Well, and how big of the area?
And how big is
is,
the
'cause
area? If
what
it's
we saw-
countywide versus one.
What we saw last year was it did actually decrease in terms of size of the PSPS area affected and the duration compared to the year before. So we're hoping that trend continues, and that would offset any increase in fuel costs.
I've never been one to support the conservation surcharge, but if the board decided to put a vote for a surcharge for the expense of these PG&E shutoffs to balance our budget in case that they got, it became a significant time frame, and $500,000 or, we're spending several $100,000 a year on this, aren't we?
Right.
So do we have to, is that a rate increase, or is that something that we could do without a Prop 218? Could we enact
No, we would have to.
PS charge expense surcharge?
We could call it the Jeff Davis surge.
Oh, I won't vote for it. I'm just trying to get I'm just trying to see if one of the liberal folks on the panel here, Bertha. No, I mean, it's at some point we got to be realistic about this. I mean, I still think we should be charging PG&E for this stuff, but
That's a good question. I don't think we would have to, but we would have to make sure, because we're gonna get a lot of pushback on that. So it may not rise, it may not be a 218 level of review, but it would have to be, we'd have to very clearly document what that additional surcharge is gonna be for.
well, I can't believe
that
that people throughout the whole state at least don't have that in the back of their mind. How do you pay for this, for the expenses? I mean, it's significant. I mean, just,
Right,
the
'cause
labor,
we're
the
also
fuel,
paying-
the generators, the stuff we've already paid for, just to prevent this stuff, or prevent.
Right, so it's
And
gonna.
it can't be a cumulative thing. We got it 2 hours today up at the hill.
Well, that wasn't a PSPS event, but that power outages in general,
Uh-huh.
that cost is going to affect the district. And in addition to that, we're getting hit with higher power costs because they're charging us to upgrade their infrastructure and to offset their wildfire liability. So we're paying more to water agencies and wastewater agencies and every other service provider that has to compensate for PSPS events. At the same time, where the power rates are going to go up.
Well,
to
then we
pay
got fuel.
for
and
wildfire liability.
Fuel's going up, and then we got overtime hours as well. It's just a lot of stuff that goes into it. It keeps growing.
Just something to think about.
And then the other semi-related, not PSPS, but just fuel in general. So our fuel line item specifically for operations for utilities again, is based on the, current and past trends that have happened in, this budget to date and projected forward, and then last year's budget, as well as the budget before that. With fuel prices, if they stay the way that they're staying, that also maybe become an issue. So we're just gonna watch those line items very closely, and we will just keep you posted.
Can't wait for those electric trucks.
Yes.
Rebecca, on the subject of fuel, I have frequently noticed in Copperopolis that CCWD trucks always fill up at the service station that charges the highest price. 15 cents a gallon more than brand X down the road. Maybe Damon's the person to answer this, but has there ever been any discussion about that? Is it just a convenience factor or what?
Yes, so that's a continual topic of conversation, is not only where their folks are fueling, but what type of fuel they're getting. And so it's just something that we continue to work on with field staff.
What do you mean by what type of fuel?
Sometimes they'll pull Supreme rather than regular, and it depends on what piece of equipment they're putting the fuel in.
Oh, so we're getting away from the diesel rigs, right? Is that the deal?
Well, yeah, so in terms of the rigs that we're running, most of them are gas powered now. Yeah, and then so the other topic of conversation is related to PSPS is this recent iteration of the action plan that we have for PSPS has resulted in some changes, and we've put some fuel storage at our mechanics warehouse that we're going to now send staff there to pull diesel fuel for equipment. We have 3,000 gallons of storage there, and we can move that storage here when the warehouse is constructed. But it also speaks to gasoline, and we do have 1,000 gallons of storage in Copper. So we just it's just something that I continually work with our supervisors to remind staff to go fill off of the storage that we have, especially when we're in a non-PSPS event, because then we can replenish those fuel stores in anticipation of the events. And what I've always heard from the local fire folks, CAL FIRE included, is we look at June and we look at October for Calaveras County, really based on the prevailing winds and the weather patterns for PSPS events.
Okay, but when you say there's something you're constantly working on, have you said to people, don't be fueling at the high priced station?
Well, yeah, that part of the conversation is, well, if I'm 5 minutes away working on a leak and I have to go get some fuel, do you want me to drive, 20 minutes away to get more fuel? So we get kind of in this.
This is early in the morning. This is
So they should be
7:30 in the
filled up
morning.
before they take off to wherever they're going. Right.
Planning.
Yeah, right, right.
But if they're rolling from the plant, rolling straight out Little John versus going down Copper Cove is 3/4 of a mile farther.
Right.
And most communities aren't that big, it's not a 20-minute difference. I mean, if you look at Valley Springs, I don't know what the cheap gas is, but
There's a difference.
Yeah, no, there is a difference.
They ought to come up here, it's 375 up here, and it's 415 in Copperopolis. So,
Yeah, there's a difference in every town. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Even just for perception, I mean, for a director to notice it, I wonder how many ratepayers.
Right.
That's not a good feeling.
Because you do have a statement in here about frivolous and unnecessary purchases, and that's,
Right, yeah, yep.
Well,
that's not.
Understood.
We ought to give them the latitude of deciding, okay, is this going to add half an hour to my day or
It's
something?
been $3 to drive another half hour, or,
Yeah.
it's gonna save $3 or whatever.
That's enough on that, but I'm just curious about why do we have a used CNC machine? Do we have a machinist working for the district? Or?
Well, that's what's proposed in the capital outlay. Actually, yeah, so all of our mechanics would be able to make use of a used CNC machine. For instance, one of the items that they brought to me when I asked them about that piece of equipment is, why would it make sense, is we have aluminum filter screens in our absorption clarifiers of all of our filters. And that's one of these items in a water treatment plant that over time fails. They're about $6,000 a pop, and we've replaced them at the different facilities throughout the years, independent of filter rehabilitation. We could CNC a stainless steel unit for dramatically less money and really get our money back on the first crack of the purchase for the used machine. But not only the filter screens, I mean, there's a lot of components, flanges, a different pump and rebuild components that we could manufacture.
A CNC machine it typically runs inside a casing, and you can program, put a billet of whatever you're working with inside this machine and type in the directions, and it'll make the part for you.
It's water-based.
I don't think so.
It can shoot water jet. So the ones we're looking at, the used ones are not like, I mean, you can get really elaborate with CNC machines, but it's basically a 4x8 panel with a computer that you can set a piece of metal on, and you can program in the measurements. It's almost like a 3D printer for metal. So you can program in the measurements of what you want to have it cut, and it will cut to your specific measurement, whatever it is you need. So sometimes when we're out in the field, like if we need to weld a spool or a flange to a spool, you know, we could do this on Sunday afternoon at the shop in an emergency rather than call a supplier and ask them, hey, do you got a flange in your yard? I'll meet you halfway in Sacramento and drive, you know what I mean? We can just go basically cut it, make it, right.
Well, I'm pleased to hear you suggest that we have people on staff that can run the machine. That's,
Yes, oh yeah,
that's
yes.
good stuff.
Yeah, it really is. It's exciting. We've had great mechanics over the years. We have two fairly new mechanics. I think both of those two are still within their first year, and nothing but great things to say about their performance thus far.
I'm sure they'll find quite a few things that they can make faster than they can order.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Any other questions on the?
No.
That last guy built that building for them.
Oh, we're still gonna stay on this.
Thanks, David.
He's about to retire. He's gonna make motorcycle things.
So the capital outlay, if you have your budget packet with you, it's on page 36. Kind of hard to read up here, but that is where you're going to see that used CNC machine. We also are including office remodel for additional offices here in headquarters. But
What is that for?
Yeah, explain that.
did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so we need some additional offices. We're tight on space, and so we need to reconfigure some people and add some additional offices.
We get 4 out of Damon's office, can we?
The hangar.
At least. Where are we gonna put these offices?
I think currently, topic of a lot of discussion. Brad even has a model that. Yeah, but I think a couple of them up front here, and then maybe reconfiguring some of how we have engineering and operations set up to make sure we have enough office space.
How old is this building?
7.
8, 10 years
Plaque
old.
on the wall over there.
It wasn't, it's been a gradual process over time of adding and reconfiguring, and we've brought more people into this office, which is, I think, is beneficial. We want to continue to do that.
So how many offices would you say you're doing?
I'm hoping that will, between some reconfiguring and then construction of new offices, I think we're shooting for 3 or 4. Yeah, so that's the plan then.
Who are they gonna be? Like engineering is gonna be separate?
Yeah, so another one for engineering. We moved Jared out of the office that Jessica's currently using, and he's in a cubicle right now. And so adding another office in customer service, to kind of a shuffling of different people, to kind of optimize the use of the space.
Excuse me, I had a question on upfitting for new leases.
That's for vehicles.
That's for vehicles. So when we lease the vehicles from Enterprise, we have to add additional components or equipment to those vehicles for them to be utilized in the field.
Oh, okay.
How is that going? I mean, I realize it's a different product than normal car leasing, because, the whole leasing thing now, they've sold all their cars, they don't have anything to lease. I mean, are we projecting the same pricing? Are they keeping up with their demand for these trucks and stuff? Or is it going to escalate because of what they've done in the rental market?
Well, so that kind of to what Rebecca said earlier, in terms of this year, it's the verdict is still out on which vehicles we're going to get. We selected 6 150s and 3 1-ton trucks, and then a 2.5-ton truck. The 1 tons and the 2.5 ton, it looks like those should be available. Ford and Dodge, they're still saying they have supply. But in terms of F-150s, Ford closed the door on the availability the same week that we put in the request prior to budget to go ahead and initiate the call to have those vehicles ordered. I think Enterprise can still do some work. So in terms of what they're trying to replenish with their rental market and what about
the cost of those vehicles that we're getting? Is it
their state, the lease is about the same still, yeah. And the program is working really well. Calaveras County took the district's lead, and they've implemented the program as well. So next year is where we'll need to kind of take a pause and take a hard look, because that will be the first year from the first 10 vehicles where we can look at resale. And so this will be kind of the first year where we stop, look at what the resale value estimation is going to be and how that looks when we roll that money back into the program. The F-150s look really lucrative because the special districts receive a discount, a deep discount on the purchase of those vehicles. So we can get that through the lease to own program through Enterprise. And so we could actually keep those vehicles for a year and sell them for more than we purchased them for, and hopefully recoup some of the fuel and upfit costs as well. And the upfit on the 150s is pretty minimal. It's going to be basically a Tommy lift gate, so we can lift chemicals in and out of the back, and really a side toolbox, maybe 2 side toolboxes at most. So it's not a full service body, which changes the calculation a little bit. Those really do work well for resale for 1 tons though, because generally they're going to go to the large construction outfits, and they want the service bodies.
Well, those used vehicles have gone up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And there's still discounts on those when we go to resell, but just not as deep as the 150s.
I got a question, Rebecca. I can see if there's a total cost of, for example, the remodel for adding new offices, 25,000. I can see the distribution of the cost between the 2 funds, the 2 enterprise funds. But when you have something like 2 GIS device and one is going to sewer and the other one's going to water, why do we still have to use that same division of, or should we still be using that same formula for dividing that expense when it's so obvious that it's a $10,000 expense and one of them is going to be used by water, the other is going to be used by wastewater? Shouldn't that one be even 50-50? Or, I don't know.
Every expenditure, if it's being utilized for both enterprises, will be split based on how the rates were identified. So
no, I understand that. It was
Yeah.
being used equally by both, but when one's being used, it looks like it says one for distribution, one for collection, and it's a GIS device. Doesn't seem like there's much overlap for that device into being used.
Oh, yeah, that's a good catch.
Because you're buying 2 of them, and one's
Yep.
being used for wastewater, one's being used for water. I can see the other, I mean, a lot of other things on here, but is that the way it should be?
No, we probably need to move those over.
Just to make it, the
Yeah.
distribution 50-50?
Yep.
All right, just kind of getting technical.
Thank you.
Way to put our sewer back in the hole again.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Doing what I can.
You didn't do the good thing right then.
Okay, any other questions on the capital outlay? Is it taking time? Did it switch on your?
No. Sorry. I have to be quick on it.
Okay. So the next one is debt service. So Cindy had asked at the finance committee if we could please add the year of when the debt would be paid off. So that was actually a really good suggestion. So we included that in here. And if you wanted to see this more up close, this is on page 24 of your budget document. But the new debt that we are including in here would be the USDA AMI and the other Vector truck. If you recall, the board approved the ordering of the Vector truck, but we won't have outlay associated with the Vector truck until this next budget year. So this will be the first year. Interest is so low. We'll probably do the same thing that we did on the last Vector truck, which is just do like a capital lease loan because it's almost free money. Yeah. So those would be the two new ones. The AMI radio read, we budgeted a little bit high. This is based on a 15-year amortization schedule, but the true debt service is going to be dependent on when we, are completely done with the project. But we included it in here just in case something crazy happens and we get it completely done all on time. And in terms of how much longer do we have between that sewer water fund, it will be paid off in 2028. The internal loan associated with the operations headquarters, that will be paid off in 2023. So you can see what the current balance is. This is terms of principal balance on all of the debt, including the new debt, interest that's going to be budgeted in this next budget, as well as principal. So total payments of 2.1 million, and our ending principal debt will be 14.9, so just under 15 million as of June 30th, 2022. In terms of the capital improvement plan, these schedules are at the very end of your budget document. That would be page 37 and 38. They're still small, but they're bigger than what's going to be on the screen. But overall, we have $112 million in total future projects, including this next fiscal year going forward. We have $12.6 million in projects budgeted for 21-22, but take that with a grain of salt because $9 million of that is associated with grant loan subsidized projects. Specifically, we have the AMI project and we have the Redwood Tank project. So we have some pretty significant dollar amount CIP projects. And then that's where the lion's share of that 12.6 is going to be spent. There's a lot of information with regards to the CIP in terms of the narrative in your budget document, and that is starting on page 12. And it talks about the capital improvement plan overall, as well as the grant loan funded projects, the expansion and R&R projects, and it gives a really good narrative of the projects that are incorporated in the 21-22 budget, what they're for, and why they are slated for outlay in this next budget. That is included in this budget document for water and for wastewater both. The annual R&R funding, this is for water and for sewer, is about 4.5 million. The thing to make sure that you're aware of is these are fixed rates. So the money that comes into the water R&R and the money that comes into the sewer R&R is fixed. It does not go up. So the unfortunate part is the project costs go up every single year. So that is something that we'll need to continue to have conversations on, because for the 21-22 fiscal year, we are covered in terms of paying for the outlay. It's the ongoing expenditures for the rest of the projects that we need to come up with a solution on those.
On the West Point Wilsonville consolidation project and wastewater, we got $500,000 going in this year. What are we doing? What part of that project is going to be able to be done this year?
Yeah, can you answer that?
It's going to be the design. So just today we reviewed the preliminary design. The overall cost for the successful bidder for the design was around $470,000. So that should cover all of that, and we can start to move to construction phase services, which is develop the bid and the front end documents. But it's really going to be design.
Okay, and as far as that goes, where is it going to be? Is it going to be on the site of either of the other ones?
Well, so that's part of the preliminary design conversation is, for the most, I think we can feel most confident that it's pretty much going to be at the West Point wastewater treatment facility. However, there still is an outline.
Is that downhill from Wilsonville?
Yeah, well, kind of. It is, but in terms of where the current spray field and storage pond for Wilseyville lives, it's actually a little uphill. So what would happen is we would have a lift station at Wilseyville, collect all the sewage from the Wilseyville community, what is it, roughly 26 residences, and then it would push that sewage to 2 holding tanks at the West Point waste treatment facility. There is still a possibility that there could be some sort of septage receiving at Wilseyville. However, right now in the design, it looks like that would also be at West Point wastewater. So we essentially push everything to West Point, but we would still keep our ability to use the spray field at Wilseyville alive if we needed to. So there would be a pipeline kind of back and forth between the existing infrastructure now. We would lose the storage pond.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what level is that? Is it secondary level or not tertiary?
You're right, correct. Yep.
Secondary?
Yeah, secondary. And there would be, one of the key focuses of the grant would be solid handling. So that's one of the items that was really kind of being analyzed in the preliminary design.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good to see that going.
Yeah.
So the one change that we've been discussing since we put this presentation and this document together that we will be making an adjustment before it comes to the board for adoption is it's with regards to the Sheep Ranch project. That's a coordinated effort with is it the fire?
Yeah, Calaveras County and the fire protection district. So there was work to essentially find some fire protection storage for the Sheep Ranch community, and Calaveras County is going to be gracious enough to provide us with some funds in order to complete some site improvements and a tank reassembly, and the district would provide a bolted steel tank for fire protection storage at Sheep Ranch. So it's kind of a win-win for both.
Thank you. But we will be making that adjustment to the CIP plan.
On Redwood tanks, which of those in which areas are being done in this fiscal year? It looks like almost 1.4 million.
Yeah, so that would be tank 8, the furthest most tank in the system off Miko, essentially off across the highway in the Forest Service property. Okay. And then Heather Tank in Forest Meadows. So Heather Tank is off Heather Drive. It's a really big redwood that you can see from the road.
And where's that?
It's in the Forest Meadows subdivision.
Oh, okay.
Kind of at the top, almost to Wild Ridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's 1.4, those two?
Yeah, they're the 2 of the largest tanks in the overall project. So the other 3 are somewhat small, like we call it the Flume Court tank, Meadowmont 13, somewhat small. And then 4 and 5 consolidation the volume is smaller than 8 and Heather. And there's also kind of an add-on component, which is the steel tank replacement, Larkspur tank, which is also in Forest Meadows.
Is the one off Miko across the highway, is that the one that squirrels got in
Yes.
last year?
Yeah, that's the tank, right, yeah,
Good,
yeah,
good to see,
yeah.
good to see that going.
Ties into Techite.
Thought that was a skunk.
Skunk? It's an animal, it's a rotting animal, whatever it was.
Yeah. And you're gonna remove more tulies
treated,
at
drinkable.
White Pines? Is that the only place you have?
Nutrients.
Well, no, so yes, DSOD, Michael and I were at a site visit with DSOD some months ago, and it was identified, yeah, it's time to get the tulies out of the spillway at White Pines. So Jessica's working on some, reviewing the environmental requirements associated with that, and we will do that with district in-house with the construction crew. And we're also experiencing a tule infestation, if you will, at the Bummerville Reservoir in West Point.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
catch.
you like that. Oh, that was good. And so we actually, it's somewhat concerning that the capacity is being impacted by the tulies there too. So we're going to go ahead and work on that. If you recall, we had Bear Creek debris removal work effort that's spanned a couple different construction seasons.
Right.
Last year, there was water flowing in Bear Creek in September and October. So this year, we don't anticipate that to be the case, and we'll be able to go in there and muck out all that debris that came in during the 2019 atmospheric river storms. While the crew is there, we can then mobilize over to the reservoir and work on removing those tulies also.
I think the only environmental requirement is to do it really quietly at night.
Yeah, that's great. Infrared.
Yeah, keep your mask on.
Yeah, exactly.
Under the cover, under the cover of darkness.
Okay, and so these are just the same schedules that are in your document as well. And so are there any questions?
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of the, on the water plan, the West Point backup water filter.
That's the second filter. We got a partial grant from the McCallum IRWM. So we're moving forward. We have design.
We're working through the preliminary stages of design right now, yeah.
Right, so we have a firm selected and we'll hopefully construction next year.
Yep.
Plan on that. So we're adding a second filter. There's only one filter there right now, which means we can never take it out of service
Is that the only one that we have that we can never take out of service? Is that the only without a backup redundancy?
For as far as water filters go,
Yeah.
maybe Sheep Ranch.
Yeah, Sheep Ranch has one pressure vessel also.
Yeah.
And how many customers we have in West Point? I mean, Sheep Ranch.
Sheep Ranch is 48.
Okay.
We have other facilities though, where there probably should have been a second, redundant piece of equipment installed. Tanks come to mind. And so there's other areas, there's other things that we probably should have had a second, a backup system installed at the time of construction and didn't. So I don't know if there's.
And not that I have any objection to it, but the capital R&R, we had $550,000 funds going into something that wasn't there before, or how does that work?
It's been there. This is one.
Secondary one?
This is one we've been working on for a couple of years.
The
second filter at West Point.
There
We
is
got that.
there's always been a second filter, it just has never worked?
No, there isn't a second filter there, right?
So we're adding,
Oh, you mean as
far as using R&R funds for restoration and refurbishing of things that are already there is what I thought that was for, and not adding and expanding.
So there's
Am I talking?
backup filter system that has actually never been utilized. So, and the technology that it uses is obsolete. It's no longer, the state will no longer allow us to use it as a filter. So if the existing Trident filter, which is what we have at Hunters and which we have at Copper and Jenny Lind, if that filter fails and we have to go to the backup system, this system's no longer permitted. It's an elevated.
Okay, so it is there.
It's there.
Okay,
yeah,
never mind,
yeah,
never
yeah.
mind, good.
Yeah.
Rebecca, if you don't mind, I'd work with you offline on some of these. I'm just kind of going through some of these things just to know, make sure. Like on one telephone that was off by a lot. So I may ask you, like, for instance, on page 28. We've got,
Page, which page?
page 28 of what we got in our packet.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just kind of seeing, I'm comparing what our actual is to what we're gonna be budgeting. And so for instance, toward the bottom, so the control system pressure transducer, we have 2,800 actual, but we're budgeting 10,000. So you can kind of give me some ideas of what that is.
Yeah,
I don't need to do this here.
Damon can attest, because I beat him up all
Yeah.
over on these. And so the problem is, on some of these line items, while, yes, you know, this year we're not gonna spend it, and maybe last year we didn't spend it,
So now we are.
when we do, when something goes wrong, it's like the expensive piece of equipment. It's not one of these failures that's like a couple $100. It
And I-
ends up
and I-
being like 10
I
grand.
get that. I just thought if we just take a few minutes, you know, we'll go over just to make sure there's no typo somewhere that's missing a good number. And then like on the ozone system parts, it's actually 47, now we're budgeting 10,000. So maybe we didn't get to it this fiscal year. So we're going to the next, that kind of stuff. I'm sure they're all explanatory. But I just want to make sure we don't get that telephone, you know, that just
Oh, yeah.
one little zero that was missing was a lot.
It was a lot, yeah.
So just having another set of eyes, I'm
Yep.
sure you guys have looked at all of them, but.
Any other questions?
I have, you know, looking at, I did what Cindy did,
Mhm.
what's down and what's up, but we can talk about that
Okay.
offline. It doesn't, there's nothing that's really shocking or whatever. Back to the Thule's, however, we have, 138,000 that we were going to spend. And I was looking that West Point was going to use 100,000.
In 22, 23.
I just saw that. What line?
It's on page 37.
Because I didn't think Scott needed all that.
What,
The
Rebecca,
Ratterman Reservoir.
The Bummerville, yeah.
Rebecca, how did we use a percentage, or is each one of these salaries and wages increases, is it just consistent? Did we just use a percentage, or is there, I mean, I assume there's some of them.
Oh,
more-
help me come up with the salaries and benefits?
Yeah,
So it is a big giant spreadsheet.
I'm sorry, what?
It's a big giant spreadsheet. What I did last year, I went to a conference in the Bay Area with Liebert and Cassidy, and they had a conference about suggestions on labor costing. And so they gave out, it was an all-day conference seminar. And they gave out some templates and some, you know, kind of best practices. I did labor costing at the county as well. A lot of places do labor costing on spreadsheets. It's a little easier here because we have less employees to have to deal with. But basically, I coordinate with HR to identify where everybody is currently in terms of what range, what step, what classification. My spreadsheet takes into consideration their hire date, whether they're PEPRA or Classic PERS members, their current enrollment for health, dental, vision.
Let me ask the simple question. Are you using their current wages?
It's their current wages. Yeah, and so the one thing to be mindful of is you know, if someone's going to get a longevity, for instance, in November.
Right.
The spreadsheet that we do is we just calculate it as though they're going to get it in July. If they're going to get a merit in November, we just say as of July 1st.
So that is what, it's not an assumption that there's going to be an increase in salary. It's not an assumption. It's the facts that some of them will go up in step.
It's the facts
So we're
that they're
using
gonna
the
go up in
current
another
salary,
step. Mhm.
current contract, all that. That's
Yes.
what's reflected in this budget.
Yeah, we do go a little bit on the high side because I don't want to cut short on longevity. Also, I don't want to spend, 160 hours trying to calculate salary for 70 people. But,
Well, it doesn't seem unreasonable. I think the board needed to understand that
yeah,
that's what's going on.
it's pretty precise in terms of all of it. Now, it's based on a snapshot in time. So if someone was at a current classification, let's say they were at a 2 level, and then they end up moving, through a career ladder and they go to a 3 or a, whatever, that would not necessarily be incorporated here.
Bottom line, this is all assumed with their current contract.
Current, yeah.
Okay, so if anything changes, we will have to revise these numbers.
We would have to revise these numbers, yeah,
Or we got a $5 million cushion in here, we could just use that.
correct.
Instead of an adjustment going forward. When, on the spillway, Bertha just pointed something out to me. There's on page 37,
Yep.
in the West Point Tully removal spillway, is there $200,000 worth of work to be done there? It looks
Going
like,
White Pines?
No,
oh,
that's-
White Pines, White
Yeah,
Pines,
that's
White Pines. Okay, so it's
West-
100,
I get those confused all.
So is what-
WP and then West. Point.
okay, so that's what I thought. So West,
Oh,
yeah.
so
oh.
White Pines is $100,000, 2 years in a row?
Could be, yeah.
And that's what we're budgeting? Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Do we have
And
a
then
4
with West
o'clock with
Point-
So it's every
this?
single year that has to be done and it's $100,000?
No.
Do we have
no,
a 4 o'clock?
so
It was just done like
that
last
that was
year.
one section.
1 o'clock.
Oh.
It was just
It was
one,
1 o'clock.
it was
was
kind of
1
by the
o'clock?
ball field.
Yeah.
Right, and by the
four.
park, and by the parking lot.
Right, yeah. So we've got the spillway and then the other side.
Okay.
Yeah.
And people complained about that. Do you know that?
Oh, I bet.
Look,
Yeah.
now you can fish, now you can swim.
There's some that
And
stands
people
out,
were
we probably
complaining.
reallocated
It was
it,
done.
page
It was
35 for
good.
state water rights fees.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you reallocated to a different department or something?
No, so look at those 2 lines, the federal dam and admin fees and the state water rights fees. So historically, what has been happening
Oh, I
is
see, you put, gotcha.
so just
I knew there was an answer.
every year we find something in the budget that we're like, well, I don't really know why it was done that way.
Reallocate.
So the federal charges should be in the federal line item and state should be in state, yep.
Awesome, I'm good.
All right, anything else from the board?
Yeah, Rebecca,
Is there really only one employee in water resources?
There is?
Gosh,
Absolutely.
no help? They give you no help at all?
1 employee, but he has 3 brains. We're getting a deal there.
you started off today saying that this new format is a step in the right direction to get back to a position where the accounting can be recognized as an excellence in accounting. I think you're there. Good,
I think
you.
it's very good.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
So there, you've been anointed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. We will make the adjustments that we discussed today for the proposed version that will be adopted on the 23rd. I'm not aware of anything else that's coming up. I think we've got everything else covered, so we'll make those adjustments and those will be in that final document.
Good job.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank
does
you.
that conclude
Thank
everything?
you, Rebecca.
Yep,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Okay, general manager's report,
I think I'll save it for the regular meeting next week.
okay?
Yeah.
Board reports, information, future agenda items. Director Underhill?
Yes, we had another break at White Pines Park and
A
it
break-in?
was pretty substantial.
You mean the water line?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was caused by,
Was it vandalism?
Yeah, we don't know. My understanding, actually, from what I learned from you, that they had a plumber coming out on Monday to repair the
And then I
fixture.
don't, yeah, and,
So I haven't talked to any
okay,
of
then
the
he had
committee
to come
members
back,
about it
so it was
yet.
pretty bad, yeah.
So
Okay, we will continue to have problems up there at White Pines because the tree roots are very close to our lines. And, you know, at any point, it can puncture the lines and we.
Isn't there a logging museum up there?
Yeah, okay. Anyway, that's a continuous problem. One of the things that I thought was very interesting
Chainsaws don't work though.
is in the Aqua newsletter, Desert Water doubled the bill assistance for customers in need. I thought they went from $100 a year to $200 a year. I think that was very nice of them.
Is that it? Okay. Director Adamant?
We had our JPIA property meeting the Monday. I was able to attend that. Mountain Counties is planning an event similar to the events that we've done at the Ridge in past years. We were trying to get announcement out before. Trying to be the first group to announce our presentation, invite congressmen and senators and whatnot. So we'll be having our meeting on Friday next week, an in-person meeting over in El Dorado County. And that's one of the things that we're going to be, I'd like everybody to encourage everybody to come once we get a date. Probably get a date selected this, and then we're going to send out a save the date. But it won't be at the Ridge. We're going to try and change up the facilities that we're using. Even though the Ridge is very, very nice, they start nickel and diamond and have been for every speaker and microphone, every platform you use, and it's just getting more and more expensive. It's harder to make ends meet. Anyway, Mountain Counties is back and
Great.
still looking for an executive director, but it'll happen. That's all I got.
Director Thomas?
I don't have anything to report, but there's one question that I neglected to ask Rebecca when she was up, if I could ask it now. It's been decades since I took a managerial accounting class, but I remember, in the typical accounting regimen, you have assets and liabilities, and you have quick ratios of current assets and everything. And in government, you can't really put a current value on an asset. We're just looking at what it costs to pay off this building. But is there ever any in the back of your mind or on the back of a napkin that you calculate the cost of the current value of the assets that we have? All the buildings and the trucks and
You have
stuff.
to do that?
Including the North Fork project. Why isn't that asset on our budget? On our balance sheet?
Yeah, we've
Because we have to put
had
the liability.
that conversation. Yeah, because you have to have the liability. That is the biggest issue. Because just governmental accounting in general is really based on the depreciable value and the book value of an asset. It's all dependent on what the cost value was, right? What the actual cost was. And then you keep track of the accumulated depreciation over time. The only time you would really look at what the market value would be is if we had a piece of equipment or a piece of property that was donated to us. And then we would have to go out and identify, we'd have to place a value on it because we didn't actually pay for it. Yeah, I'm sure at some point, Governmental Accounting Standards Board will make that pronouncement too, and then we'll have an asset on there. However, they will also force us to put some sort of liability, like future long-term liability on the other side for maintenance and, operations of it. So that's, yeah.
But you mentioned specifically depreciation. There's no line item in any of this stuff that shows the annual depreciation.
Yeah, so
In your audit.
it's in the audit, and ideally, I will include that in there. But it's baby steps. So right now, because we've really never had the discussion about the fund balance, and instead what we've done is we've really put a lot of emphasis on the debt payments and the capital outlay, which technically debt principal and capital outlay expenditures are, neither one of them are technically expenditures for purposes of governmental accounting. It will take a little bit of getting used to, I think, for the board and for the public, because that's what you guys are all used to seeing. But ultimately, we will switch and actually include depreciation costs, because that's technically an expenditure, and capital outlay and debt principal will not be identified as an expenditure. It will actually be included just as it is in financial statements. So that will be a shift in what you guys see, but I just didn't think we were quite there yet. So we're making an initial step.
Maybe you're underestimating us.
Also, Director Davidson, we do have a member of the public. I don't know if we asked for public comment on that, on the board workshop item.
On the what?
On the budget workshop item.
Oh, do we have public?
We do have one member of the public.
Okay, is there any public comment on the budget workshop?
Sorry to go out of order there.
What's that?
Sorry to go out of order there. I just wanted to make sure.
That's fine.
Hello?
Is that a yes?
Hi.
Yes.
Hello.
Do you have public
This
comment
is,
on our
Ralph.
budget workshop?
Yes, Ralph Copeland. And I just want to know what's included on your page 37 in the water projects. What's included in the $6.2 million for the Lake Tulloch submerged water line crossing? In the past budgets, it's varied between 1 million and 3 million. And I'm just wondering now it's doubled, and what projects, or is it just still for the water line crossing?
So the current cost is based on the most recent master plan cost estimate, which was just under 6 with a roll up of 5% increase overall. But really, we won't really understand what the true estimated cost will be until we start to get into design. So that's based on the most recent master plan.
Okay, and all right, that's all I had. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll continue with the director comments. Is there any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, Director Cicada?
Yeah,
You all right?
yes. IRWN meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock. It's a combined WAC and a JPA meeting that will attend. That's it.
Okay, I just have a couple comments. Damon, regards to, and Michael, regards to La Cantera, the water usage there. I was talking to the, what's the guy's name that operates over there?
George?
No, not George, the actual superintendent, but. Yeah, anyway, he was concerned about the lake water being turned off later this year by state order. I just kind of like to get with him because from his comments, he said that he was prioritizing lake usage and leaving the recycled water for later. And I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with them, and they know that we will not be turning any lake water off unless we're, of course, ordered to by the state. But if you guys could just touch base with them to make sure that we're gonna, I don't want to end up with a reserve of recycled water. I'm sure they could probably use it all, but let's just get together with. Okay. All right, I guess that was really all I had in regards to that.
Well, I got a further question about that. That's what spurred that lawsuit. Are they using raw water right now? Do we know?
Yes.
Yes.
And is it because there's not enough recycled water?
No, there's plenty of recycled water at this point.
Did you just?
Yeah.
Let me explain it again. They're concerned that the lake water is gonna get turned off later because of the drought scenario. So I don't, know, did that actually happen the last time?
Conservation, during the lawsuit it did, but during the
No,
conservation.
no, I
it
know,
didn't.
this is, I'm talking about the last, when we went through the last
Conservation.
drought thing, did we ever turn the lake up? No, anyway, I just want to make sure that we find out, or at least try to find out what the state's gonna do. I don't think that they would turn water off for us for that recreational use, but,
We'll take a look.
yeah. Because they're worried that the state's gonna do it, and then they only have the recycled water,
Right,
so they're not using it,
okay.
so. All right, I guess we've got a closed session item. Next board meeting is June 23rd at 1 PM. I forget why we changed that, but that is a normal date or normal time. I don't know why I think it's 2. I was. Okay, we're gonna adjourn to closed session, Government Code 54957.6, agency negotiations. Is there any public comment on closed session items?
You just left.
Seeing none, we will adjourn in the closed session.
Mind if I take a couple minutes? Yeah.